everyone. I'm Kirsten Vermeulen, Executive Director with BCivic, joined by my colleague, Jess Welser. Hi, Jess. And welcome to our Sparks and Sips series. Today, we are focused on the integration of HR and CSR. And, you know, it's been since February since we've actually had an opportunity to sip with you all. We produce 30 plus events a year in addition to resources that we hope help you elevate your business for good. But we do miss you, and webinars are a challenge, as you all know, and so we've tried to get a little bit creative with today's format, and so we're going to have some opportunity to connect, as we always do with our Sparks and Sips series. But then also at the end of today's session, we have actually one of our founding board members who's going to join us and train us in a mixer. So invite you to do your own sipping at home after the 5 o'clock hour. So that's how we'll round out today's event. And our format will be a brief framing from each of our panelists, a little bit of background on their companies and their programs, and then some moderated Q&A with our extraordinary facilitator, Monica Williams. And then we'll open it up to a dialogue with you in the audience, so get that chat box ready to go. And then, like I mentioned, we're going to close out with a fun little mixer for you at the end of the event. But for now, we thought it would be a nice way to kick off the event, as we normally did with our Sparks and Sips series, to give you an opportunity to make new friends, reconnect with old friends and colleagues. And so we're going to do some breakout networking. And Jess, if you want to pull up those questions, and we'll go ahead and move into the networking series. So if you would like, please share your name, where you're currently working, a little bit about your organization. And then we've got a couple of questions here that you feel free to choose from. So a highlight from your summer, a good news story that's really lifted you up in the last month, or a new effort that your organization has taken to keep employees engaged during this time. So we're going to take, welcome back. Nice to see you all. So just a couple of housekeeping notes. We will ask that everybody who is not speaking go ahead and mute their line. And then as questions emerge, we would love for you to enter those into the chat box. Of course, it's not limited to questions. If you have resources or kudos or any thoughts or reflections that you want to share, we would love for you to share that in the chat box throughout today's presentation. I want to start by thanking the committee members who really helped us to shape today's program. So Katie Dell and Katie Curtis, hello to you both. Thank you for your support and really for designing today's program. Both of these leaders not only serve on our programs team, but also as board members for BCivic, so deeply engaged in our work, and we're so grateful. As we were thinking about today's session, the integration of HR and CSR, at the same time, the BCivic team was working on an employee engagement toolkit, and happy to share that link with you if you all are interested. Some wonderful, uplifting best practices in that toolkit. But we looked to Gallup to really better understand what the employee engagement trends have been over the last couple of decades, and they've been doing this work for about 20 years, actually. And what was so interesting in revisiting that just before today's session is to see that there have been spikes in employee engagement. So they've been doing this research for the last 20 years. And in the last 2 months, they have seen an all-time high and an all-time low in employee engagement. So that's just interesting for us to provide that context for today's conversation, right? These are extraordinary times. And, you know, it's even in the best of times with employee engagement, what we're looking at in terms of a high is 40%, which honestly is not great, right? 40% of folks are really enthusiastic about their jobs and committed and believe in the company and are aligned with its values. And then you have a whole nother 40% that are unattached and not particularly passionate about their work. And you have 13% that are actively disengaged. And we know from the work that Gallup has done that, you know, the cost of disengaged employees is very high. I mean, that's turnover and absenteeism and lower productivity and even health outcomes. And, you know, more now than ever, we need to ensure that our employees are engaged. And what we love about hearing from our colleagues in the BCivic communities, the folks that have been doing the work to measure this correlation between HR and CSR anecdotally, but also, you know, really through some robust evaluation, is that when those strategies are aligned, there is higher engagement and loyalty and satisfaction and performance. And so that is the basis for today's conversation, more important now than ever. And we're so thrilled to have such an extraordinary panel with us today and the expert moderation of Monica Williams. And so shortly, I'm going to turn it over to her, but can't do so without a quick intro. So Monica, she is the executive producer and expert consultant at the Equity Project LLC, where she partners with organizations in assessment and strategy, planning, consulting, and facilitation. And Monica is also the former Director of Equity and Inclusion at Denver International Airport. And prior to the airport, she spent about 25 years in telecoms and actually has a connection to CenturyLink, formerly Quest Communications. And she's also a Leadership Foundation alum. So a friend of the foundation, our parent organization. She's also the president of TIDE. And if you know her, you know that she's incredibly passionate about equity and inclusion, and she has made that her life's work. So believe it, we are in good hands today, and I'm thrilled to turn it over to Monica Williams. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. And I am just honored and pleased to be here with BCivic and your wonderful members. And I'm just happy that we have this esteemed panel we're going to have this amazing conversation. I know they have already provided so much information in terms of the work that I know that you're going to be hearing today. And so I'm just excited for that. And so I'd like to thank each and every one of our panelists. I'll give you just a quick little background about myself as it relates to this work and this journey that we're all on. And that is just that I co-founded an organization called TIDE, and TIDE stands for Talent, Inclusion, Engagement, Diversity. And it's a leadership roundtable that was started in about 2011, which is around the same time I started working in diversity and inclusion. And that organization started with about 8 companies you know, that decided that there was definitely a need and there was a gap to have conversations between HR practitioners and diversity and inclusion practitioners. It kind of started off as a mini support group, but then we really did find meaning and purpose in continuing to meet, and we host quarterly meetings, and BCivic has been a part of that. We're hoping to see that BCivic become even more integrated in that. And so that's really why I'm telling you about TIDE, is because we're going to be hopefully, be invited to meetings from TIDE and vice versa. So I just wanted to give you that background on TIDE. You'll find it's very similar to BCivic with some common goals, especially in building capacity within organizations to think about their communities, to think about their employees, and to think about how they're advancing the business strategies within their organizations with the power of people. And so that's just a little bit more about my background that I wanted you to know about. And much of my work that I did at the airport was around employee engagement, diversity and inclusion, as well as at Quest and CenturyLink. And so I'm just thrilled to introduce to you this really wonderful panel. And so what I'll do is I'll start based on the way the slides, the photos appear. And so I want to start with Lisa Ponder, she's the Vice President of Human Resources for RK. Lisa, and RK is a leader in the construction, manufacturing, and services industries in the Mountain West region. Prior to joining RK, Lisa served as Vice President of Human Resources for Stantec and ThyssenKrupp North America, owned her own HR consulting firm, and practiced employment law. She has a law degree and VA degree from Brigham Young University and a master's degree in strategic human resources management from the University of Denver. That's my alma mater also. And so then let's move on to Dave Scott. And believe me, you're going to be able to hear from each one of our panelists. I just wanted to while we're all here, wanted you to know who your panelists are before you. So David Scott is the Executive Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer at DISH. As the Executive Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer, David oversees recruiting, benefits administration, compensation, and organizational development across the entire enterprise, including DISH TV, Sling TV, Boost Mobile, and wireless. Dave began his professional career at Walmart directly after college. He held levels of increasing responsibility in most HR disciplines across his 20 years in the company. When he left the retail giant, he was serving as the SVP of Talent and Organizational Effectiveness. All right, and then last but not least, we have Sondra Smith, the Director of Social Responsibility at CenturyLink. And then I'm gonna flip this one. So Sondra Smith is responsible for strategic vision and leadership of CenturyLink's global corporate social responsibility program, CenturyLink Cares. Prior to CenturyLink's acquisition of Level 3 Communications, she spent 5 years building a CSR program at Level 3 and 10 years on the legal team. Ms. Smith manages the Clark M. Williams CenturyLink Foundation, a private foundation, and she also the executive director of the CenturyLink Community Giving Foundation Incorporated, established in 2015. And so if we could give a round of applause to our panel. Yay, you can even use the caricature that you can pull up with your hand clapping. And so I just wanted to start and kick off this panel discussion with just the panelists are each going to go into some slides that they've prepared, but I want to ask the panelists as they're kicking off with their slides, if they could each talk about the convergence of the two pandemics. We've had the racial justice pandemic and also COVID-19 health pandemic. And I just think it's important to acknowledge the time that we're in, just as Kirsten did, and just to kind of get some of that explored, especially with our panelists, because it's impacted us all in very different ways, but it has impacted us. And so if you all, as you go into your slides, if you could each just address that for us, that would be awesome. And so we'll start with Sondra, please.
Jess, do you want to go on to the next slide? So here's a little bit about CenturyLink, and Monica, I'll walk through the slides, but if you have any questions for me, you just holler, okay? So CenturyLink is headquartered in Monroe, Louisiana, though we do have about 6,500 employees here on the Front Range. We are the second largest enterprise internet provider. As I noted here for the US, we have 43,000 employees. We do provide services in over 60 countries, and we have employees in 37 countries. My team is 4 employees, so we're spread pretty thin to make sure that we are providing community relations opportunities across our organization. And in the last year, we did end up moving to HR, but we have had a strange and interesting journey to get into HR. And Jess, you can go to the next slide. So as Monica mentioned, our corporate social responsibility program is called CenturyLink Cares. I work very closely with our sustainability team and also our governance team because I'm ultimately responsible for our environmental, social, and governance reporting. But the social piece, the S of ESG, is basically CenturyLink Cares. We do view that corporate social responsibility is an investment in our people and in our communities. And so because of the tie to engaging our employees is why we moved to HR about a year ago. And we do try to create lasting social impact while making a positive difference in the world. And we do that through our employees. And Jess, you can go to the next slide. So I'm a fan of Waldo. I have 2 grandbabies, and so we like looking for Waldo. And so where's CSR at CenturyLink? And if you go back a few years, where most of our funding was through pure philanthropy, it was through the private foundation. We were located actually in the finance team. For a brief period of time, we were located in legal. Then we moved over to the comms and the PR team because we started devoting a lot of our energy and our dollars to marketing and sponsorship. Right then, that was when right where we acquired Quest Communications, and we had a strong consumer presence. And so we felt that it was really important that we do a lot in the community, specifically around branding and reputation. And then in 2017, CenturyLink acquired Level 3 Communication, which was predominantly a B2B organization, and that's where we gained a lot of our global presence. And so we really tried to reimagine what it looks like for this company, because the consumer piece then became less than about 5% of our revenue. And so in 2019, we moved over to HR and sort of reimagined all of our programs, and that's where we really started unlimited volunteer time, concentrating on teams, and then really how does engaging our employees in the community impact employee engagement. And we started doing a lot of very pointed employee engagement surveys around CSR. And then in 2020, right before the pandemic hit, we were doing a lot more energy around STEM, because that's who we are. We're a technology company. And then the pandemic hit. And so we sort of reimagined what CSR at CenturyLink was again. So we did a lot of contributions around very specific organizations supporting global relief efforts around the coronavirus. We engaged our employees. We matched all of those employee donations. Obviously, we went to working from home. We closed our offices. And the interesting thing when you think about employee engagement, not just around community, but we have actually found that our employees working from home, maybe because we are a technology company and maybe because we can work from home, but we have seen a spike in productivity with our employees, and we are now doing weekly check-ins, and we are finding our employees are actually more engaged because the company intentionally is we have more communications. We have leader calls with our CEO on a weekly basis right now. And so I think that is where we realize that our leaders really are checking in with us more often. And so we have seen a natural spike in employee engagement and productivity. And I think there's a couple more slides where I can show you some data. Jess, if you want to move on. The other thing that we have always done, and Monica, to your point around D&I, so you were with CenturyLink, and I'm sure that you and I are going to have a lot of stories that we can share around CenturyLink, but we just hired our first Chief Diversity Officer in the last 2 months in response to the George Floyd instances and the racial tension that we're feeling also within our organization. And so the CSR team has always partnered with our ERGs and with our diversity and inclusion leadership team. But in the last 2 months, we have now hired our Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. She was actually a director, part of our talent management team. We promoted her into that role. All of the ERGs now roll up to her, and now she and I will continue to partner with all of our 10 ERGs and with our diversity and inclusion leadership team to ensure that all of our corporate social responsibility programs, we are always considering diversity as one of our elements. Even though we still concentrate on education in STEM, we are now concentrating on very specific programs to support our diverse youth, our under-resourced youth in locations and in our employee bases across the world. So now we have an even tighter tie in with our diversity now that I am now partnering with our Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. Next slide. So here is one instance where we are now being able to track very specific empirical data to tie our employees more engaged if they participate in CenturyLink Cares. And so we are asking these very specific questions. And in 2017 and in August is when we do our pulse surveys. In 2017 and in 2019, we found that employees who participate in CSR programs are more likely to feel greater accomplishment, more respect for the company, and also that their peers are more reliable and care enough to go above and beyond. And I think that most of us in the CSR space realize that employees who participate in any of our programs in any way, shape, or form, those are the employees that do care. They're more likely to help somebody else out. And so we're able to track this very specifically to our employment surveys. We also found that if you are engaged in our CSR programs, and in 2017 we have 9 programs, in 2019 we actually have 12 different programs, we found that you are more likely to stay with the company, you recommend the company as a place of employment, and you have more confidence in the future of the company. One thing that I was able to track for 2019 is employees who participate in volunteer programs are more engaged than employees who just give money. So if you have an employee giving campaign or you have a COVID relief campaign and you can donate dollars, we find that employees who actually engage in volunteer programs are more supportive of the company and more apt to stay longer with the company than employees who donate. And the other interesting thing that we found with volunteer programs is all of us participate in episodic volunteering. You're going to go to the food bank for a couple hours. You're going to go participate, one day a month for Habitat for Humanity, or maybe a shelter. But if you have programs where you can develop relationships, which we have found is a lot of educational programs, a lot of programs where they're skills-based volunteering, and it could be around STEM, it could be around financial literacy. But if you can define those programs around relationship-based, that's where we get the biggest bang for the buck. And the next slide, you can actually see this. So here I actually pulled a slide from some data that we recently pulled for our 2019 survey. And here was a really quick snapshot of some of our very specific programs. So you can see our engagement overall for our employee base with 72%, which actually for a technology company, I thought that was really high. So sometimes I question how honest the feedback is, given just the anecdotal comments I hear. But one thing that we were able to track is the programs where it's very relationship based, you see it's the highest. The other thing that's interesting is all of our programs, you can see that the engagement is much higher than on average for our employee base. But wherever I have a relationship-based program, the PTech program, the Teachers in Technology, our ambassadors, you will find that the employees are engaged more and feel more strongly about the company, because I think that they can actually see the impact that they're having in the results of the clients that they're working with. So those are just some anecdotal evidence that I've been able to pull, and that's why we were moved into HR in 2018, after we were able to see that there was a clear tie with CSR to employee engagement. And I think that might be my last slide.
That's absolute, that there's definitely a connection and a tie. And so happy that CenturyLink has taken that route and that approach to connect its diversity and inclusion, CSR and HR strategies are connected and aligned. That makes such a big difference. And so we'll come back to you with more questions, but I want to move on to Dave Scott, really quick, EVP and Chief Human Resources Officer at DISH.
Monica, thank you. And Sondra, thanks for sharing that. That was brilliant. I know we were taking notes on our side as you were sharing the data that you have, which is so exciting. Monica, maybe I'll start touching on the 2 questions that you asked. And as Kirsten mentioned, the Gallup survey, reflecting both the highs and the lows of the last several months. And I think as I think about both the racial injustice and the killing of George Floyd and so many others, and then the pandemic, I think I've gone through those highs and lows, both personally and professionally, at such a tremendous just feeling and emotional tug that goes on in all of us as humans in today's society. But it also reinforces the criticality of human resources and, quite honestly, the CSR community, and how we all come together in what are always the most challenging times. And it always makes me proud through 20 plus years as an HR professional to see the best of my employees and the best of my team members show up when the world needs us. And I think DISH, our DISH Nation certainly has shown up in that way. And I appreciate Katie Curtis and other leaders in our organization for making that happen. From a company perspective, DISH is a 40-year-old startup. We have been known as a pay TV company, but we've recently bounced our way into telecommunications in a big way as we're building the world's first greenfield stand-up 5G network, and as of last month, entered into the retail wireless space, and have really had a great opportunity to expand to a new consumer base and compete against some really amazing companies, and we're proud of that. Some of our brands are across the bottom. We have 2 new ones since this slide has been built. We have Boost Mobile, and then this week we acquired Ting, which is also a mobile company, and it's the early stages as we go from 9 million subscribers to, in our minds, taking over the world in the not too distant future. I'm really excited to share some of our CSR highlights on this slide. As you see, the number of hours and engagement in many of the different ways that our team members represent DISH in the community. Often in the space of disaster response is where the company steps in providing connectivity to communities it needs in floods, hurricanes, other space, but also engagement in communities of engagement like youth empowerment, sustainability, and military and the veterans, or where we attempt to focus our efforts. So much of it is in Denver, where the majority of our corporate employees exist, but it also goes through out the country where our employees live and work and participate in the community, and where our retailers are in the community, because many of our retailers are a big part of DISH Cares, which is what we call our CSR program here. CSR is located in our community relations and public relations section. So while I don't have accountability, I certainly feel like a peer and a friend and a supporter whenever the opportunity, and our teams touch base on a regular basis. As we bounce over to the next slide, it talks just a step more on places where we see the overlap, which is the greatest between CSR and HR in that conversation. And so I not only think about it as a great way to engage in the community and provide value back to the community that supports us, but it's a really fantastic leadership microcosm. And while you may not be leading a team yet, you can show a leadership role in our employee resource groups. You can show team collaboration and effort through some of the activities that are going on. It definitely is a morale and culture builder, as Sondra so eloquently showed data on. And it's a tremendous team building emphasis. And we use it broadly across all of these aspects. And it's a great retention and recruitment mechanism. One of the items that's not on the slide is it also opens doors into the community. And as a company that's out, in the near future, building 5G towers, in my past life at Walmart for a company that wanted to open stores across the country. So often your community reputation could be either be the unlock or the blocker to those types of opportunities. And so CSR in a Walmart environment, and I'm seeing it here in DISH as well, is leading the way and helping open doors and communities for us because of the reputation that we're building on top of that involvement. As we move on to the next slide, we'll touch briefly on a little bit of how we see our D&I activities and CSR and HR coming together in that tremendous Venn diagram. Oftentimes, and really all the time here at DISH, we start the conversation with our values. We have 4 founding values that we have had for 40 years and we continue to profess on a daily basis. And they're ones that we think are really everlasting: curiosity, pride, adventure, and winning. And while we do want to make sure that all of our employees represent DISH in those veins, it's through the myriad of experiences that all of us bring to life that we see diversity as a strong asset. And we've actually incorporated that into our guiding documents of our culture to make sure that the company is well aware and our employees are well aware of what an asset their experiences are. As we think about the community engagement, it really is meant to define those functions of our ERG that I hit onto the last slide. And then the overlap with diversity is in the place of education, empowerment, and quite honestly, equality are the driving factors for us. And then as we think about the play into COVID, it's really about keeping our employees safe, our customers safe, and our community safe. And everything that we do, and a huge part of my job over the last 5 months has been providing that environment and figuring out how to operate in the long term in this world. We're going to be in this space for the next 12 to 18 months, and to have a viable business, you're going to have to do these 3 items really effectively.
Thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate you really bringing out the point that all of these areas are connected. Our employees, our customers, and our communities. And that is have what I've noticed in the past that had been a missing element, is companies really being very intentional about connecting all of those, who we are as individuals, who we are as an organization, and who we are and how we relate to our customers and our communities. And so you really showed that very nicely. Thank you so much. And then now, next up, we have our last but not least panelist, and that is Lisa Ponder. And Lisa is the Vice President of Human Resources at RK.
Excellent. Just to address the couple of questions that you asked at the top, we have a different workforce. We're local. We're about 1,500 employees in Colorado. 300 of those are in Utah. And as we looked at these 2 major things combined in our workforce, 2 things really stood out to us. Safety was the first one. Safety because the vast majority of our people never stopped working, and they didn't get to go home. When you build, you are out there every day, and they were out there when things were very uncertain, when we started wearing masks, when we figured out to be getting people to wash their hands and there was no hand sanitizer, and keeping them safe that way. Then when the racial tensions hit downtown Denver, where a large majority of our workers work both there and in Salt Lake City, where both of the airport expansions in both of those major cities, then they also worried about their safety at work. We were down where the demonstrations were, and they wanted to be, safe there, but also be part of that and be able to express their opinions. And were they safe at work expressing their opinions? So we really worked on that. And then the second thing that we saw both of these things bring was a focus on job security. Do I have my job? Can I go to my job? Can I continue to support my family? And that's where we really focused all of our efforts on communication with our employees. It is not over computer. It is not through slides. It is through people and texts that we communicate and engage with our employees. It looks different, but we were putting out communications on a very regular basis, surrounded, focusing on those 2 things. Here's what your job looks like and what we're doing to keep the company moving and up and running, and here's what we're doing to keep you safe while you are out there working. So that's the shift we saw. Just really quickly, RK is a family-owned company, has been around since 1963, owned now by 2 brothers. Their father started the company, and we're 7 business units, like I said, in 2 locations. Next slide. I'll keep this quick. Lots of fun things that RK does in awards. The big one on this slide, and the one that I'll mention, is our commitment to safety. We do have OSHA VPP status, which most people probably don't know what that means, but it means we go above and beyond to keep our people safe. Things that most other companies, especially construction and manufacturing companies, don't do. We're proud of that, and we've kept that through these very difficult times. Like I said, to be good on time, we'll just keep moving. Next slide. This is the focus of what I think is the culture at RK, and you can see the 2 Kinning brothers and Katie, who's on board for your organization. There are 3 things that really stand out. One, the RK Foundation is something that we donate to. We have a steel shop and a steel fabrication shop. All the scrap from that, the metal, goes to the RK Foundation, and we focus on things that are important to our employees, education, you know, and health and community development right where we live, and that affect the families of the people who work for us in the field and in our shops. RK Cares also gives to many different communities events and programs that get our people educated in Colorado and head them in the right direction towards good careers. And then finally, something just started very recently, but that has been very well received, is a hero fund that our employees contribute to, and that they can ask for assistance for almost anything. And we have had some COVID requests of help for families that were hit very hard by the illness early on. And employees know that they're contributing to help other employees through this hard time. And then I think we have one more. And then employee engagement for us, again, is very different, I think, than in some companies. The big focus, and we'll talk about this a little later if we get to some questions, is RK's commitment to mental health. The construction industry is #1 now in suicide rates, as far as what professions have that distinction, and it's not a good distinction. And our owners really help focus on that. And it's interesting, the way they do that is we talk about it. We talk about mental health all the time because it's a male-dominated industry, and that's not normally what a male-dominated industry talks about. Is I don't feel like myself today, or I need help, or I'm not handling the situation well. But that's very normal in our businesses. My HR business partners deal with it almost on a weekly basis. People coming to them telling, I'm not handling this okay. I know we have resources. I need to talk to someone. And we have those resources available. So we have resources, and then we also make sure that as good as our physical insurances for your physical health and being able to go to the doctor, we make sure we have those same type of resources and pay just as much attention to, you can go to see someone, a doctor, for your mental health as well, and keep that going. And it's just as important as keeping yourself physically healthy out there in the field and in these difficult situations. So I would just focus on that for what we do is for employee engagement right now. I think that's my last one. Oh, no.
One more.
It's actually at RK, we're a very diverse group. We basically look like the demographics of the Denver area of which we serve. So we have quite a few races working together, and we work well together. I think that what we've seen as we've gone through this time is that we are learning to not only work well together, but to talk about race in our workforce. That's not something that's normal, right? We can work alongside someone, but when these difficult conversations come up, we are working with our employees to be able to express themselves, to tell them they can express themselves, and to help them talk together in a productive way. And they need to be able to talk about this. I feel this way. You said this, and I didn't appreciate that. That has racial undertones, or you may not realize it, but that's hurtful. And we're learning to be able to address that in the construction industry.
That's fantastic. As you might know, like the majority of some of the work that I'm doing right now is all around facilitating and moderating conversations about race, these conversations that we generally haven't been able to have. And
Right.
So now I feel like there's really a new appetite to actually have these conversations and to become comfortable being uncomfortable and really approaching the elephant that's been in the room for so long. And so I'm glad to hear that RK is really creating the space to have those conversations and really, to have upstanders, to have people who stand up when things aren't going as they should, and be able to really address those in a constructive way. I think that's so healthy for an organization. And then it's also great to hear that you all have a focus on wellness and the whole being, because that's a key critical piece of engagement. If you're not able to get out of the bed and get to work, then you know what that means. So our people are our greatest resources. And so to hear that RK is really investing in their employees' whole being, that's exciting to hear. So thank you so much for sharing. We have some really good questions in the chat. And some of these questions I'm going to volley to some of our panelists because I know that you're going to have these answers. And so the first one I want to ask Sondra. Have you found mental health downsides, and this is a question from Ben Eisenberg, have you found mental health downsides to increase productivity through COVID, being too productive and not leaving work, or burnout? And if so, is that being tackled by HR, CSR, or both?
Yes, we did. And in fact, it was interesting right after we were required to leave our offices. So we're still not back in our offices. And because our productivity has been up, our CEO, Jeff, has said, we're not going to be in a hurry. And so I think it's going to be months and months. In fact, we're not allowed to be on our campuses without VP approval. So, but what we found is that it's so easy that you get up, you log in at 6:30 in the morning, and you're still working at 8 o'clock at night. And so we had to tackle that, and we actually were able to find that through diagnostics on the back end. So we were able to track how often people were logging on. And so we found that they were just spending too much time doing their work. And so now we have weekly nudges, and this is initiated through HR. And so it's nudges. And so we've started some, some fun challenges to share with everybody the things that you're doing during the day, whether you go for a hike, or you went out and you took your dog for a walk, or you spent a half an hour and you saw your grandchild, or whatever it might be. And so we've actually, on a weekly basis, our leaders meet with all of our teams, and we specifically reiterate, we don't want you working more than 40 hours a week. We know we still have to get the work done, but your mental health is more important than anything. We obviously have our EAP that we're always pushing new programs out. We have some new mental health programs that we've rolled out. And so it's really through our HR team that is going on. But we did find that everyone was working so many extra hours, and I think we wanted to make sure that no one thought that we were bullshitting or not getting our work done, so that we were probably overachieving. And so now we've had to take a step back and say it's okay to pause, it's okay to take breaks. And the other thing is, with kids being at home, we have now given an okay from our leadership to say, if you need to be with your kids and help them with schoolwork during the day, if you need to work at 10 o'clock at night, it's okay. And so now that we've had that okay come from leadership, I think that we all feel that we're in a better frame of mind. But there are so many communications going out every single week that we can tell that the company really does care about our mental health. And so it's been great. I feel better about this company than I ever have.
That's awesome. And like I said, I worked at CenturyLink. But I wanted to say, like, the time that I started in diversity and inclusion at CenturyLink was day one of merger from CenturyLink. And so those ERGs that you showed up, I was responsible for getting them started even at headquarters in Monroe at the time. So happy to see they're still thriving and a part of this. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so I have another question from the audience, and it's from Jenna. It says, how are you defining, measuring employee engagement for your company? Is it connected to performance measurements? This is really an important question. How are you tying your employee engagement to your performance measurements for your organization? And that can be for any of you. Sondra, if you have an answer, Lisa or Dave.
I can start because ours is pretty simple. We look at two things, again, because of the different workforce that we have. For our workforce out in the field, it's turnover. And turnover is very high in the construction industry. And at least at RK, it's coming down. There can be many different reasons from that, but you know, we look at that, and of course, if we are able to meet the schedules and continue to put work in place, but we've been able to do that even with masks and things like that on everyone all the time. And then for our workforce, just like other people who have a workforce on the computer and at home, we were at home for 4 months exclusively. Now some of us are back in the office, but we did the same thing. We were looking on the back end of when people were logging in, how long they were working, and just trying to help people make good choices about how long they were working, and able to get other things done in their lives as well. So ours is a little more simple. We're a smaller company, but that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, I think that's smart to look at those measurements to see how they're trending up or down. Just for the edification of the group, there's also studies that show when you have an engaged workforce, safety incidences are reduced also. And so the safety accidents and things like that happening in your organization are reduced also. You have more conscientious employees that are being very careful and safe. And then so for Dave, I'd like to ask you a question. Can you share some of your employee engagement best practices and how you engage your remote employees, your remote workforce? It's oftentimes like when you sit at a computer every day, that's one way of engagement. You get to go to the events and that kind of thing. But that remote workforce is sometimes a little bit harder to in contact and to engage. And so can you share a little bit about some of your strategies, particularly around your remote workforce?
Yeah, I think we're all struggling with that as folks that had typically been involved in a site environment have transitioned out of sites. And Monica, I'm happy to talk about our call centers in this context. Our centers, there's about 6 of them across kind of tier 2 cities in the United States, had traditionally had a strong, not culture, because the culture is really defined at the organizational level, but I'd say a strong climate of engagement, of excitement. You'd walk into a call center, the radio would be playing, sales teams would be giving each other high fives and celebrating, big calls. If somebody was having a few tough calls, the team comes around them and engages them in a way that makes you proud to watch it operate. And as we moved about 90% of our call center teams overnight into home environments, it's become a lot more difficult to both coach them and engage them. And I've been proud of our coaching staff at the centers reaching out and connecting at a level that allows you to still have that relationship between supervisor as well as chat relationships across the team. And that's where we've seen kind of a local climate show up in the best way. From a centralized perspective, we've really upped our communication game. We've moved to weekly calls between the CEO and I, where we shoot a video talking about the company, talking about the country, what's going on in the world, and really giving a little bit of visibility to what we're doing, both in response and planning for the future, and how important it is to lock in on this idea of where the organization is going and aligning to the mission and vision that's engaged. And then watching, micro teams do very interesting if it comes to, mailing snack boxes to a home, if you're going to have a 4-hour video call so that you're snacking as you may have done, in the room at the same time. I feel like maybe the Amazon snack pack is living off of all of us that are on Zooms and Google Meets on a daily basis. But I won't profess that we've landed on the answer because it is new to so many of us. And if I'm that remote technician that is operating out of Idaho Falls that's not connected to an office, my life really is the customers whose home I'm in on a daily basis, and then the feedback I get from my supervisor remotely on occasion. And that's a really challenging audience to reach out to.
Thank you so much. That's great. Thank you for getting into more detail into that and how you're tactically doing those strategies and implementing them real time. Because isn't it true that a lot of what we're doing is innovative? It's innovation that we haven't had to even think about. And so we're having to think about new ways to engage our workforce. And so it's not as business as usual, right? And then there were a lot of organizations, even if you think about that work from home just may not have been an option. And now we're learning that working from home, we're having productivity skyrocketing in some organizations. And so it's really challenging us to even think about some of the things that we thought were normal or thought that were norms, that were best practices that really have now been challenged. And so thank you so much for giving us some more ideas and tips on how to think outside the box there. So Sondra, I have another question for you. Of all the programs you facilitate, which yield the highest results from an HR lens?
So we have a STEM program called PTech, and it is part of our building our own pipeline of talent. We, the first partnership was with North Glen High School, and we're now designing it in Monroe, Louisiana. But we basically engage eighth grade students. We partner with a junior college, we partner with a high school, and then our employees connect with them. They become the tutors, the mentors. We help design curriculum, and basically the goal is that they will get through high school, do 2 years of junior college, and then they will be guaranteed a job in one of our tier 1 positions. We started this 5 years ago. Our first cohort is entering junior college this year, and we actually have allocated spots for them in our Ops Academy. And so all of our employees who are engaged in that, they've been able to see these kids grow from 8th grade to now they're entering junior college. And every single employee who participates, including our leaders, they just can't say enough about this program. So that's one where you're building a relationship, but you're actually being able to see that we are changing the trajectory of these kids' lives. And so that has been the one that we have had the most traction, and that we're going to be able to see that we actually will hire these kids. It's just been, we're playing the long game instead of the short game, but we will hire these kids, and we made a difference in their life. So it's really cool.
Yes, that is awesome. And I saw the, definitely you having that participation in programs like that. Like you mentioned, not only are you able to impart some skills and expertise into a younger audience, but you're building your pipeline for the future. And
Right.
especially as you think of DE&I concepts and thinking about, like, it is the long game. It is thinking about, like, how do we keep ourselves from being in the same position in 5, 10 years? What do we need to do now that's going to have some impact in the future that our organizations don't look like they do today? And so I found in organizations, that was my role for future workforce development, is educate about careers in aviation at an earlier age, so that we can change what aviation looks like in the future. So I appreciate you having a similar strategy there. And so I think that we should talk a little bit more about the DE&I intersection, and just how those three are converging. And that is CSR, HR, DE&I, because oftentimes, in organizations, you find partners in those areas. I mean, you really should have aligned strategies there. But I want to talk a little bit more about how your organization has planned ahead strategically to incorporate not just we go work on community projects together with the resource groups, or, but how are you incorporating within your business strategies the emergence of aligned strategies between HR, CSR, and DE&I? Lisa?
Yeah, we decided early on to do 3 specific things. The first one is we realized that we were getting a lot of diverse candidates for our trades positions, but not so much for our professional positions. It's harder to find project managers, engineers, and executives in the construction and manufacturing world with diverse backgrounds. We partnered with a local, with an organization that would get our open jobs out to over 12,000 organizations that dealt with the different minority populations and diverse populations, including, age, veteran status, disabilities, gender, race, and LGBT, everything that we could, and we're already seeing more diverse candidates come in. It's actually really helped us with our apprenticeship program. We have a large in-house apprenticeship program where our goal is to increase the amount of women. And this is our recruiting season. We'll hire 60 apprentices into our program, and we finally have like 10 women already as part of the class of 60, which is something that just we didn't have before. We're excited about that. The second is that we are doing the education for our employees. We're doing a diversity 30-minute education that they need to do. It'll be tracked to make sure everybody does it. But we had to put it out so they could do it on their smartphone. So it was in Spanish and English. And so it was something they could do in the field. So again, we found a partner that could do that with us, and something that wasn't focused just on office, or our construction people won't watch it, right? It took us a while, but we found a good avenue there. So in the next 2 months, all of our employees will participate in, it's more education than like a training. They're just to understand how to discuss race, how to discuss diversity, you know, because it's happening, but we need to be able to do it in a productive way. And the last thing, just like you said, we looked at our executive team and our senior leadership, and we don't have the same type of numbers in that group. And although we don't think it's going to be overnight, we know we can achieve those type of numbers if we do the things like that we're doing in our apprenticeship program, and that we will get more diversity candidates in front of our leaders, so they have those to choose from. They just haven't had that option before.
Monica, if I could share a perspective on that, because I think, Lisa,
Please.
all the programs that you laid out are the right steps. The other challenge that I've seen here and at Walmart is really a sponsorship challenge. And I've actually really been excited to see the overlay between CSR and diversity in this space. And I'll use, for example, executive visibility. You know, by instituting a quarterly review of the ERG leadership teams with the CEO, it became an exchange of ideas. It became an education for our CEO, but it also became a sponsorship moment where they had visibility and a knowledge of people that were playing leadership roles deeper in the organization, that were passionate on topics. And you got to see that passion come through in informal discussion. And that's become a pipeline for us of development to the next level. And I see it in through our CSR programs as I look at you know, our Dish Care Volunteer of the Year celebrations, or the engagement of getting executives into our caring steering committee member, right? And all of a sudden, you know, our former head of Sling is playing dodgeball at the Boys and Girls Club, Rocky, with your teams, with groups of individuals that they maybe didn't interact with in their daily lives through the function, that now they have better visibility and acknowledgement at that lower level. And I think while you can bring people in and you can educate, if you don't throw in that sponsorship and mentor, really sponsorship level, mentorship is important.
Right.
Sponsorship is so much more, and it comes through these informal interactions, especially when you can show your passion on a topic. And it's I think paying dividends for us right now.
Absolutely. Like, I want to give you a standing ovation on that one, because oftentimes we want to throw a mentor at a person of color or an ERG, and really it's not an issue or a matter of capability or expertise, or, you know, some of these other things like mentors are good for. And I'm not saying I don't believe that mentors are a good use of your time. I do think mentors are a good use of your time, but oftentimes that becomes the solution to, oh, we just need to get you more something. When really all you need to give us, or, you know, people of color is exposure so that I have an interaction and you can see and get to know, you know, what you may not know already. And so I think that you're making such a key and critical point, and I got a little passionate about it, because it is sometimes where I think strategies fall down in HR, or in wherever that organizational development, or wherever that those strategies lie, because we're looking to supplement is in terms of expertise and knowledge and those things that are already present. Do you get what I'm saying? Does anyone understand what I'm saying? It's more about, like, it almost becomes a microaggression, in my opinion, when you say that you need more in order for you to be qualified to move up, as opposed to saying you're already qualified, you're already capable, you already have the expertise. Let me get you in front of the right people. Let me get you a sponsor, someone who can speak on your behalf when you're not in the room. Because that's really how I define sponsorship. It's somebody who's going to speak on your behalf when you're not there and can make critical decisions and influence decisions about you. And so thank you for giving that bit of information for us. I know, I just want to check the time really quick. So can I just have, let's see, we have some questions in the chat. So, Jana, I was going to ask your question. And your question is, I'm curious about the equity part of DE&I and how the companies are making investments in equity. I'll stop there. Anyone want to take that one on? Sondra, perhaps?
So the equity part of companies are making investments, stock options for entry-level employees, decreased stock for C-level. So you're talking about the equity within the company. You know, obviously, I'd have to rely on the HR folks. I can tell you that years ago, we stopped giving stock equity to all employees. So I'll rely on Dave or Lisa for that one. I can only speak to the CSR piece.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I think that's a good point about equity and wealth in various diverse communities or racially diverse communities. But I know the E in equity for DE&I is generally speaking about equity, creating a place where everyone can thrive.
Right.
And so there may be kind of a different understanding of definitions there, but it is true that, you know, equity and building wealth, that is a key component of how we should be looking at our policies, looking at our benefits, and how do we create an equitable place in our benefits? Because giving everyone equality, which is giving everyone the same thing, may not be the way to go. And so that's that might be an opportunity point for our HR practitioners, CSR, I know that's community focused, but our HR and DE&I practitioners to think about, like, are we providing equity in our benefits and how we designate stock and how we designate investments and sharing in company profits? And so that is huge. Like, I like the question because it's something that we don't always talk about.
Right.
Right. And so, but I think it's an important thing for us to look at.
I think we're fortunate, if you want to use that word here in Colorado, to get the nudge from our equal pay for equal work law that's coming into effect at the beginning of next year. That really has us taking a serious look, and not just at gender, but at all the different things in our total compensation that could really be inequities in how we compensate our employees, and not just in the salaries that we will be reporting out to the government, but in total compensation. What do bonuses look like? If the bonuses are subjective, are they being given in an equitable way? What does vacation look like? When we do exceptions to vacation, is that happening in an equitable way? Who has vehicle allowances? Does that make sense? All those things that you need to look at when you look at how people feel included in an environment. They need to feel like they're being they're being compensated the same as others that they're doing the same work.
That is certain. I agree. And that's all I have to say about that. You talked that off very nicely. It's just needs a period or exclamation point.
Yeah,
Anyone else?
exclamation
Dave?
point indeed. Yeah.
Yes. Okay,
Any
Christine.
other closing
Kirsten?
comments? Yeah, we've just got about 10 minutes left, so would love to hear any final thoughts from folks as we close out.
You know, I would like to make one comment. Monica, you mentioned microaggressions. And one of the things that we are doing at CenturyLink is we have opened up listening circles with our executives. And the first thing, where it's a safe space and every employee in the company is encouraged to participate in these listening circles. And the first thing we had to do was help the leaders learn to listen. Because so often when you bring up comments or concerns or perceived microaggressions, the natural response of a leader is to fix something or to react or to respond. And so the first thing we had to do was help them learn to not say anything, to just listen, which is really hard to do when you've got, you know, a group of 30 people and they're coming at you. And so I've been really proud of the company in how we're helping our leaders learn to just listen. You don't need to react, you don't need to respond, but just listen. And so I've been really pleased with that. And then, you know, everyone in the company is going through unconscious bias, and we're taking a look at all of our communications where, you know, what kind of lexicon, what's our terminology, where there might be perceived, you know, inequities or discrimination or microaggressions. And we've been fostering that for years and we're just not aware of it. So that is another thing that we're looking at, that I'm really pleased that the company is taking that level of effort.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's something that we need to do. We need to first have the conversations and then do something about it, right? I mean, I'm saying in your policies, in how things have been procured, or how whatever those policies are that you said have been fostering those environments. Absolutely. Well, I just want to thank you all for giving me this opportunity to lead this panel. Such great insights that came from our panelists. I would like to thank you all for sharing about your organizations and sharing your own personal insights and journey. And I thought that it all was well done. And I appreciate you all for sharing so openly and candidly. And I learned a lot even myself. So Kirsten, thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you, Monica. Yeah, thank you for weaving this integration so skillfully. We really appreciate your perspective and artistry for this session. And just want to pause and do a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you again, Lisa and Sondra and Dave. And I missed earlier on the call, we have an additional committee member. So Jana Matheson is also on the line and supported us with this session. So thank you also, Jana, for joining us and being a part of the development. Before we close out, we do have a moment that has been curated by one of our founding board members, Mark Berzins, lead dog with Little Pub. And Mark, are you on the line and ready to take over the screen?
I am.
Fantastic. It's all yours, Mark. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. That was a fun conversation. And speaking of fun and informative, and maybe more interesting at this point in your day, I'm going to teach everybody how to make one of my favorite summertime cocktails. And so, in honor of the Colorado Avalanche, who are beating the Dallas Stars right now 2-0, I'm going to give a little flair to my favorite little Hendrick's gin and strawberry lemonade cocktail by adding a few blueberries. So we're actually going to have some strawberries and some blueberries in this cocktail, and something that's really easy to make at home. In fact, for those of you who don't have a muddler, I'm going to use a wooden spoon to muddle my ingredients. Really, all you'll need is a pint glass and something to shake in. I have a shaker tin, which if you just have another big plastic cup, you can probably shake with a plastic cup. So this is something you can all, the moment you get up from where you're watching this, you can go to your kitchen, make this delicious drink. So a couple rules of cocktail making. You build your cocktail from the bottom up. And so I'm going to just take the stems off these strawberries, drop them in the bottom of this glass. Blueberries can just go right in the way they are. You don't know what muddling means? You ever wondered? It just means taking any implement and smashing those things up in the bottom of your mixing glass. And you just want to kind of get the juice out, like so. There's your avalanche colors. And then you put in your spirit. In this case, I love Hendrick's Gin. And Hendrick's Gin has some cucumber essences in it. So you'll see I will be garnishing this with a fresh cucumber from my mother's garden. But you put your booze. So in this case, I'm going to put my Hendrick's in here. You put your shot right on top of those muddled berries. And then stack the glass with my ice, like so. Make sure you put plenty of ice in there, unless you really have an aversion to ice. Lots of ice makes a delicious cocktail. A little Simply Lemonade. If you're in the anti-sugar crowd, which we did earlier this summer, you can use, what is that called? The sugar-free Crystal Light. You can use Crystal Light lemonade if you want to go sugar-free. Top that glass off with a little lemonade. Shaker. Again, you could probably even use a solo cup. Give this a good shake. Always shake your cocktails. If you wonder why your cocktails aren't good, probably because you're not shaking your drinks. It kind of emulsifies the ingredients and aerates your cocktail. You can see that already looks delicious. I'm going to put it in a pretty glass for my wife, because I'm a smart guy. And there you go. That is a little strawberry and blueberry lemonade that is summer deliciousness. Oh, and I forgot to garnish it. Here's my garnish. Take a little wheel of cucumber there. Now it's even healthier. So.
We'll be right over, Mark. That looks amazing. Thank you. And thank you for your work at the Capitol to advocate to keep so many small businesses open during this time. We really appreciate your leadership.
Yeah, if you guys don't be afraid to go out. We're working on great outdoor spaces. We're working on some plans to better clean our indoor air so it's safer than ever to be inside. And just know here in Colorado, we're doing a really good job. A lot of compliance checks going, and it's really heartening to see almost no corrective action being taken. So great job, Colorado.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. And Jess, do you want to close us out with some announcements?
Definitely. We will share all of these great follow-up items in a recap email coming to you later tomorrow or Friday. We will also be sure to include Mark's recipe and a link to a little pub company. They have 22, maybe more, I could be wrong on that number, pubs and bars across Denver that you definitely will want to go to, especially as you support the Avs and all of our other great sports teams that are coming back online. But here in the upcoming weeks, we do have a few great events. Our first one is going to be on August 26th from 1 to 2 p.m. We're partnering with the Denver Metro Chamber to really highlight more in-depth employee engagement strategies you can take. Going off of the toolkit that Kirsten mentioned at the beginning of this call, we'll be featuring some of our members sharing how they go even more in depth with employee reviews and different opportunities like that that you can take. We'll also be hosting our traditional breakfast with CSR professionals coming up in September 22nd from 8 to 9 a.m. And here you can truly ask a CSR professional anything from career advice to what you might be missing in your role to how they make the business case and support nonprofits. And then my favorite event of the year is coming up on October 22nd. So please join us for our full day of the Be Civic Summit as we do go virtual with some fabulous keynote speakers. We really, if you have any questions, please reach out to Kirsten or I. Thank you again to our panelists, and thank you for those of you that were able to stay on as we did go a few minutes over. Have a great rest of your night.